Ryan. So let's start off with Sedrick Irvin because
Mm-hmm.
he's a very interesting player. Obviously, for me personally, I don't know how you feel about this, Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
This is a bit of a juggling act for me, and trying to figure out that was a little crazy, that color there. This is a bit of a juggling act for me. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
why it's showing up like that. It's not that color on my screen, so I don't know what's going on. Is that showing up as like pink and?
No, it's blue.
It's showing up as normal. Okay, so then it's just mine. It looks pink and green on my screen, so I don't know what's going on.
You're good.
All right, if it's looking good on yours, then that's great, right?
Yep.
So when I wanted, like, I feel like the double-edged sword, or the difficult part for me is I want to talk about him as his own man, but I feel like because of the way he plays and his body type, it's almost like we're then doing a disservice to people if we don't mention the fact that he's Sedrick Irvin's son, because there are some similarities between how they look and how they play. Obviously, his dad is Sedrick Irvin Sr., who was a running back in Michigan State. Notre Dame fans who were around in the Bob Davie and Ty Willingham era, he was kind of around during that time. Will probably remember Sedrick Irvin Sr., and he was a physical, tough, smart back, Ryan.
Yep. 235 pounds. Yep. Downhill plunge. Yeah. It's funny. I was actually wondering this the other day, Brian. I would love to know how much Sedrick Irvin Sr. weighed going into college, right? Because we know he was 235 during the latter stages of his Michigan State career when he was at his best. But I would love to know if he was a similar size to Junior, because that would just kind of from a projection perspective. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I didn't know he was that big, to be completely honest with you. I didn't realize he was that big there. Yeah, but I mean, he was a physical back. I'm going to see if I can somehow find it. While you're talking about him, I'll see if I can find it. Cool. But the thing about his son is, obviously, when you look at what Sedrick Irvin was as a player, Sedrick Irvin Jr. is not there yet from a strength standpoint.
Sure.
But here's the thing that I like about him, and this is, and we'll kind of dive into his strengths as you kind of look at his recruiting ranking. Top 300 caliber kid on 3 sports. I don't even think they've ranked him at this point in time. I don't even think there's even a 3-star ranking for him. But when you look at when you look at Sedrick, to me, the first thing that stands out is the build, the frame, and that's why I feel like we are doing a disservice if we're not talking about his dad, right? And because what I like is I like 2 things I like about running backs that I always look for. Number one, I like running backs that are built low to the ground. I feel like low leverage running backs, it's good because it's harder to go low on a guy that's 5'9", right? I mean, if you're a 6'3" linebacker and that running back is 5'9" and he's running with lower pad level, chances are, he's going to win that low man battle, right?
Right.
And guys with the lower frames tend to end up developing thicker legs. And that's kind of where I view Sedrick Irvin. He's got a very low build. He's got a developing frame. He's a pretty cut kid. If you look at him, he's got a very athletic body. His lower body is not super. He's not big, right?
Dense.
His lower body's not big, but you can see the frame there that it's like this kid's going to get into a college weight room and he's going to be 205, 210 before it's all said and done. Is the way I see it. And it's all going to be in the thighs and the butt, right? Because that's what because he's not only short, and what I mean by low build, he's got short legs.
Yeah.
Like if you look at him, he's got a really long torso and short legs, which means when he gets running, he's going to be even lower. And it reminds me, a lot of his dad, right? And he's more Emmitt Smith than Barry Sanders in body type. Because you remember, Barry Sanders was short, but he had kind of long galloping legs. Yeah. Emmitt was short and had shorter legs, and he just could, kind of have those really short power steps. When you talk body frame, body type. And that's what I see from Sedrick, is a guy that's got that real low, that really short legs and that low body type that I like in running backs personally.
Well, and you talk about why that matters, right? Like when I think of the 2 different body types that you're trying to illustrate a little bit, right? We're talking about the guys that have shorter legs comparative to a high cut kid that might be someone. Think about an Eric Dickerson for the people out there. Think of an Adrian Peterson,
Josh
Adams,
if you're looking for Notre Dame references.
if you're looking for Notre Dame comp, for sure, that would be a Josh Adams with that high cut frame. it's tough for those guys to play so low at times, right? They look like they're galloping, and it gives them, it just kind of gives defenders a lot more to tackle sometimes, right? And those guys are usually a little sleeker, maybe have longer legs, so they might be able to, you know, kind of hit the second gear a little quicker. But I also do like the shorter, stockier frame potential. And I actually wrote down when I was watching him, I thought 210 would be perfect for him because I think that he can develop that and also not lose any of the athleticism that he has. And then you have still the ability to have a low center of gravity and contact balance. I think that people always talk about contact balance. They throw that out. Well, for me, I always think of a pinball, right? Like that short, stocky DeAndre Swift, Kyron Williams, like that type of body type, right? Those guys are usually the ones that are the guys that just don't seem to go down on first effort. And that's what I think of when I think of Sedrick Irvin Jr. is I think of effort as a runner. I think of the ability to maintain that balance, to defeat contact, to navigate chaos a little bit.
You know, I think too is when you're a bigger guy and you're trying to, and you get into traffic, you have to make a concerted effort to dip, like get low and rip, where a shorter back already has that frame where he just kind of just powers through. Natural. And I think that kind of leads into the point too. He's got really quick feet and he's got really good balance, really like his balance. And that's important for a running back. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to make quick moves, allows you to make a move. And then once you plant, you're right back in the running phase, right? You ever see like a guy give a stiff arm and kind of leap and almost hurdle. And then as soon as he hits the ground, he's right back to running. As opposed to a guy that may do that and then he kind of stumbles and has to gather himself for a couple steps. You know, that also allows you to be really good after contact. You know, guys with good balance can get hit and kind of stay up and keep running. And I think those are things that you see from Sedrick. You especially see that on some of the game film I've seen because, I mean, the thing you'll see on film is he, you know, like I said, he's a one-cut runner with little wasted motion. He kind of has to be. Because when I watch film of him, like dudes are getting on him pretty quick. You know, he's got to make decisions and go. And I like the quick feet. I like the balance that fits what Notre Dame does, in my opinion. That inside zone, outside zone, where he's got to stretch, and that you kind of go down to 0.4, Ryan. As you put these three together, they kind of all fit together. They build on each other. When you talk about that patience and decisiveness, what you want to have a back's got to be able to plant and go. Right. But you don't want him to just plant and go at the snap because he's got to let the hole develop and there's timing. You got to make your read. Am I cutting back? Am I bouncing it? Am I going right in? You know, do I hold the ball, stay on my track until the guy makes a decision? Then I got to cut and go. You got to combine that patience with decisiveness. And I see that from Sedrick. And I think those are the things to me those are the things that graded him out as a 4-star because he's not an elite athlete. He's not a burner. He's not a guy that, at least on the film we've seen, displays great speed. It's good, but not great speed. And even though we talk about he's got good pass game potential, he only caught 12 passes last year for 170 yards. So he has potential there, but they don't throw him the ball a lot. It's those traits that you say this guy's got some natural feel for the game that makes me think he could end up being an even better player than maybe his projection would be right now or his production will be right now. That's kind of how I see those when you look at the strengths of Sedrick Irvin, right?
Yeah, I love the patience, and I think that would probably be my biggest one outside. Well, actually, maybe even more than just the low center of gravity balance that he has, because I really do think that it's so important when we're talking about it, specifically running inside zone, right? Like we're talking about, like if it's a zone left, for instance, a lot of people think like, oh, it's going to hit left, right? But that patience, because a lot of times zone hits backside, right? Like backside A to B. That's where inside zone hits. And then when you're an outside zone runner, I mean, in theory, you want to hit the corner, right? Like you want to go off tackle in a perfect world. But a lot of times you see where, defenses aren't dumb, right? That they're going to overplay a little bit. And then that's where that cutback comes in at. And I think that really demonstrates, when I think of him, I just think that he understands. And some people think navigating space is a trait where you have to be this special athlete. No, that's where the vision and that's just where the awareness of being able to work in space. You kind of just see things develop in front of you. Right. And I think that that's what Sedrick does best, in my opinion. Right. I think that's his best trait is that I think he has an innate sense of how things are developing around him.
Which is how a guy like Terrell Davis can go from, back up in college to one of the best 3-year stretches in the history of the NFL. Yep. He was not the biggest. He was 205, 210 when he played for Denver. was not a home run hitter when you look at him from a 40 time standpoint. You know, he was not a guy that went to the combine and blew up or had a pro day Georgia and blew up. You know, he was a guy that transferred from Long Beach State. You know, and he was back up to Garrison Hurst, right? Used him at fullback at times. But that he had those other intangibles that are so important for a running back, and that's how you can see a guy like Trent Richardson on the flip side, who's built like a tank. Ran, I believe, wasn't he a 4.4 guy at the combine?
So, he was definitely a 4.4 kid when he tested. Yeah, he was a freak. Yeah,
but he was not a very good running back because he didn't have that feel for the game. You know, he was great vision at Bama because they just would open these big holes for him.
Yeah,
and he was a 5-star in high school because he was the biggest, strongest, baddest dude on around. Well, then you get to the NFL and everybody's a big, bad, athletic dude, and it's about who's got the IQ, because that's one thing I think is often lost when you look at like great college players and great NFL players. A lot of them are not just great athletes; they're also really smart football players, right?
For sure. Yep.
And you look at a guy like Isaiah Simmons, for example, right? One of the freakiest athletes we've seen. I mean, they would use him all over the field. You can't do that if the guy's not a smart football player. Right. And running backs too. Like, you got to be smart. You got to know, like, I'm watching this linebacker and I've studied his film and I know when he turns his hips to this or his shoulders to this degree, I know he's playing over top and I know I got to cut back. So I'm going to set him up. And I mean, it's just that feel for the game that the good ones have. And some guys that are elite athletes don't have that. And then there's some guys who aren't elite athletes who end up being like Tony Jones Jr. Dude averaged almost 6 yards a carry in his 1 year as a starter lineup. And he ran a 4.7 because he had a really good feel for the game. And
he's hanging around in the NFL too.
He can stay healthy. He'd be doing a lot more if he could just stay healthy for the Saints. But and that's what I see from Sedrick. He's that kind of guy, Ryan. And I point to this Manatee game because this is a perfect example of how I see Sedrick Irvin. 21 carries, 103 yards. That's about 4.9 yards a carry. Had a long of 13 yards. And I watched the game and I'm thinking, it was a solid game. You know, he did some good things, ran tough, smart kid. You know, I was like, but I don't think the production was there. Then I went and looked at the box score and I saw that he had 21 carries for 103 yards and a touchdown. You know what I mean? Like, he's just one of those guys that just does the job. But when you put a guy like that behind a great offensive line, then you start seeing more production. And and that's how you see, like, with the Torian Folstons before his injury set, it's why you see a Tony Jones Jr. go for 4.9, those type of things. And so when you have guys like that, they're going to be productive. Now, they may not be take over a game, go dominate Bama guys. He's not that, right? But they're guys that if you put a good team around him, he can help you. And then the last thing, I think the pass game potential is there as a pass catcher. There's some good film of him in pass pro in high school, and he's like most high school backs. It's a process, right?
Sure.
But the potential is there, and that's another thing I like about those low build guys, because you're going to try to come at the quarterback, and he's going to run right through your kneecaps because that's how he's built. So, and he's a lot like Kyron Williams in that regards. Now he's not as like, the frame is similar to where Kyron was in high school. Completely different types of players, though. I'm only comparing the build to Kyron because Kyron was a super shifty guy. Sedrick is not that. Sedrick's a one cut go kind of guy.
Right.
But there's some good tools to work with here for him.
Yeah.
Ryan.
Yeah, and I think that the pass game stuff is, and this goes from if you're evaluating high school players, it goes if you're evaluating college players, NFL players, right? There's a lot of guys that come to the NFL right now that they don't have the pass game profile, right? They didn't catch a ton of passes. They weren't asked to do a ton in pass protection, but it's just because that's just how the offense dictated that they play, right? Like, they just weren't given the opportunity. So when you're evaluating that type of stuff, I want to see, is the kid fluid enough to run some routes potentially? Does he have soft hands? Does he fight the football? Like, those are the things that you see. And Sedrick has that, in my opinion. Like, he has comfort as a receiver. It just hasn't been asked of him a ton in the situation. Now, like you said, he's going to be at a different school next year. So let's see what the usage looks like. It might look a little different next year.
And that was part of the reason he left, was because he went, he had 137 carries last year for Gulliver Prep. And there was some questions about, okay, is he really being used properly? I think that was and when you watch the film, it's kind of like, yeah, okay, I get it. I have those same questions. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I don't know if he is being used properly. And those are the things as a young man and as a parent that you kind of have to look at and say, okay, it's not all about football, but it's like if your son or daughter was an excellent math student and the high school they went to had a bad math program, wouldn't you consider moving your child to a program where you had a better math program that would better, build around their talent, because you think they've got some opportunities to go to college and turn this into a career, that kind of thing. It's no different from football, in my opinion. And so that's the decision that him and the family are making. And I think it's a good one. And that's why Ryan and I have talked about this. We both kind of have we're going to give you our evaluation of where he is now, but of all the players in the class, he's the one guy that I'm most going to try to stay open-minded about as a senior, because I do think there were some O-line issues and some usage issues that I think make it like, I don't know if I really know everything I need to know about Sedrick Irvin at this point in time.
Yeah, and he's only a high school junior, right, going into his senior year. So just physically, he's also going to develop. I think it was you, Brian, that said, right, like you liked Jadarian Price as a junior, right? But then his senior year, it was like different, dude, man. Like it just that gear came, right? Because these kids are still developing. Let's remember.
Well, and what I didn't know too is Jadarian was injured as a junior, which we didn't know about because he wasn't out there making excuses for, which is another reason I love that kid. Yeah. But we didn't fight. And actually, Jadarian never told us that. His coach, Brian Smith, went out there for one of his games this year, and he was talking to his coach, and he's like, "Yeah, what a lot of people don't know is he was banged up all year last year." And I'm like, he put up the production he had last year against the talent he plays against as a banged up kid. Okay, let me see what he's going to do this year. And I think he had like 300 yards in the game that Brian went to. So I mean, did pretty well. So there's always that open mindedness, but I think, like with Keon Keeley and Peyton Bowen, like we know they're going to improve as players, but like you already kind of know who they are. With Sedrick, it's more like I really don't know if I have a great feel for Sedrick at this point in time. Before we dive into the film, there was a question about this that I thought was really good. DMND 13 says, with the 3 services that have him ranked, they're actually pretty close in ranking, unlike some of the other guys we've seen. And we'll see that with Cooper Flanagan as well, that there's a pretty big gap between the rankings. Do you two have him in the same ballpark, top 225 to top 250? I do. I think it's a very fair ranking. I mean, I think anywhere from 225 to 275 is kind of the sweet spot for me with where Sedrick is based on what we know about him right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would be roughly in the same ballpark just about. And I think that it does speak volumes that, again, the 3 services that we highlighted were relatively in the same ballpark. So people have a similar opinion, I think, right now, right? Like there's not a huge variance. It's not like one service has them top 100, another service has them 200. Like there's not that huge variance. Right. I think it says that most people see him similarly, but again, we want to see him with a higher volume next year to see, what the overall kind of outlook is on him. Because I just think that's a limited sample size a little bit.
Because supposedly Columbus is going to feature him more. Is part of the deal. So we'll see how that goes. So let's dive into some film here, Ryan. Does that film look good to you? Is it coming up normal?
Looks good.
This is really jacked up for me. I'm gonna have to take a screenshot of this so you can have an idea of what I'm looking at. I have to show it to you after the show. So let's dive into the film here, folks. And this is actually, I believe, his spring game this past spring. So like I said, there's not a lot of great film of Sedrick. Here he is at quarterback, just so we're clear, running a little bit of a wildcat quarterback. I think that's with Jalen Brown. But you'll see the quick feet. You see the cutback. That's good vision right there. That's that vision we talk about, Ryan. This is is this power read or outside zone? Yeah, this is power read. So you can know it's power read because you see the backside guard pulling right here. So he's pulling around, so you know it's power read. Okay, which basically what that means is they're running a jet sweep or a sweep play with the running back. Right. And so if the end crashes, then he's going to hand that thing off and they're going to get outside. As you can see, the end takes the jet, right? Takes the sweep action. So you keep it, you get up inside, stays vertical on his track, and then cuts it back. So that's the good vision that we talk about.
And it's really nice vision because that thing is not supposed to hit there, right? Like it's supposed to hit front side off of that read.
Power is a front side play. Correct.
Yep.
Correct. Yep. He's supposed to be getting – yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, no, I was just going to say somebody, I think 54 is the offensive lineman that got beat across his face a little bit, right? There's a little bit of leakage there. So he has an excellent vision to see that, hey, my track needs to change now.
Yeah, 54 gets beat inside. That's your thing, that's your job. You are supposed to not give up that. You're the cutback guy, right? And he not only gets beat inside, but he gets pushed back a little bit. So he's got to cut behind that guy. A power read is basically supposed to see this lead blocker here. This is an A gap out run normally. One of the two A gaps out type of run, but this is supposed to be a block, like the call side entry point. So yes, that's a good observation, Ryan. That's not supposed to be it's not a zone play where if they're running inside zone right, if zone goes the way you want it to, it cuts back.
Yeah. Zone gives you options. Power, you're supposed to know exactly where it's supposed to hit.
Very calm. Acts like he's been there before because he has. This is a little counter action. And again, you'll see a lot of this on his highlight tape where he's kind of getting hit in the backfield and having to make it. I'll tell you what, his high school film looked a lot. Maybe that's why I thought of Kyron. His high school film looked a lot like what Kyron went through this year, where you're having to make dudes miss in the backfield.
And honestly, that helps a guy with vision. I mean, I thought Kyron took a big step forward with patience and visions this year because he had to. He was forced to.
Right. And this counter is another play. It's a between the tackles run, right? That's forced to bounce because of you can see he's going downhill and he's forced to quickly bounce it outside because of the penetration.
Yep.
And good recognition by his lineman to read that block as well and get outside. That receiver does not lineman, the receiver right there that does would that be a receiver
he's
tight end.
He's at like a wing, number 4.
Right. Good recognition of where that thing's going and getting outside.
Nice block downfield too.
Yep. And this is that. So like he doesn't have like this is what I'm talking about. Like look how smooth and efficient this dip and rip is. Like a big guy's kind of got to really lower it, but at the end of this run, he just kind of dip and rip real fast and just trucks this dude. And the fact that he doesn't go down right away speaks to the strength, but also that balance that I'm talking about.
Yep.
Right? A guy that lacks balance and really flexible ankles is going to run over that guy and then go right on top of him.
Yep. Love guys that finish runs. Love it.
That's that toughness where you're like, because you can see like right now on this film, his thighs aren't like super big.
No.
Right. I mean, but they're gonna fill out, right? You can see this, like the calves are they're defined, but they're not quite, really super big. Those things are gonna change as he gets out. I love this patience here. He's getting behind that block. What he's doing here, the reason he's not just running, if he just takes off to the corner right now, his receiver is blocking inside of this cornerback. So like right there, if he just sprints to the outside, this DB has the angle to just get off that block and go tackle him, right? So he's patiently letting that block develop to where eventually he gets on that guy and bounces off. So he's now able to maximize the yardage. So even though he gets outside, he allows that block to stay engaged longer because he's running right at the block, right? Yeah. And that's a smart, savvy play. And then that also, the DB plays this pretty, relatively well too. If the DB comes off too quickly at this point, like right now, if the DB comes off and just goes outside, Sedrick's cutting right in between 4 and 5 for a touchdown, right? So this is really well done by both guys, but Sedrick's able to maximize this run because he stays patient and he sees that's that instinct thing. He sees the color on the outside because that's one of the things I would teach my backs when Ryan is like, you see color, you cut, right? Like wherever you see color, you cut away from it. I mean, color means it's the opposite of, the opposite color of the team that you're playing.
Right.
Get the ball. This is it's one of my biggest pet peeves. Get the ball in your outside arm.
Yep.
I expect the kid of an NFL back to know that.
Yep. Get it outside arm just in case, right?
Because right now, if these guys come and tackle him, he doesn't have an inside arm free for a stiff arm.
Nope.
Right?
So you see a little bit of juice, right? Maybe not the fastest runner, but he has plus speed. It's good speed.
Well, and here's the thing. Watch when he catches the ball and squares up. He is at full speed right now.
Yep.
Like right now, he's at full speed. It reminds me a lot of Torian Folson in some ways with that body type, and he's not being a burner. And I love it. He catches it. Both of these catches, he does the same thing. He catches the ball and immediately squares up. Like that little turn right there is a real efficient way of catch the ball, square up, get your eyes downfield, and go make a play. Get the ball in your outside arm.
Yeah, he's definitely a no nonsense type of kid, right? Like he wants to get north and south. There's no dancing to this young man. He wants to get vertical in a hurry.
Yep. He understands the importance of getting every yard you can. Maximize the yardage opportunities that are there for you on a play. That's a nice little. This will say this isn't super shifty, but this is a nice one cut. But what makes this play is he sees right now. He sees this guy is on him. Yep. So you're like, okay, I need to press him outside because if I make a cut now, it lets the help get out there. So he presses outside. Okay, make the catch, press outside, and once that guy commits, you cut inside and maximize your yards. These are those high IQ plays that I really like that he just does naturally. And you can see really efficient. He does. It's not super choppy, just cut and vertical. Bam, 1, 2, I'm vertical. That's that balance and that agility that the quick feet that I really like. He's not Reggie Bush type of jukiness or even Kyron Williams. He's a very efficient running back.
Yep. Again, just enough. Just enough. You know, he understands how to set guys up. He understands how to set them up here.
He reads his block really well.
I was gonna say again, he presses outside, just kind of like how you illustrate a little bit, gets the leverage there, and then is able to spin back for a couple extra yards.
And James Ingles, we're looking at Sedrick Irvin Jr. He just got here and said, "Who are we watching?" Again, you see the stuff on there, Ryan. I mean, you see what we talked about in that film.
Yeah, and if I could speak also, obviously we're talking about him as a football player tonight, right? Speaking of Sedrick Irvin Jr., which you see the traits to be what I would consider a good all-around back. Like I see that kind of upside with him, but I would also say he exemplifies what I think of when I think of a Notre Dame fit, right? And that is, you know, every time I speak to him, he just continues to talk glowingly about Notre Dame. He's one of the guys that I would say in this class is really pushing for a lot of players. He's a guy that wants to build something special at Notre Dame. So he's a fit not only on the field as a football player, again, top 250 caliber player, which I think upside to improve in his senior year, but also a great kid as well. Just absolute great kid.